The crowd was electric. The atmosphere was absolutely there for a potential big-time home win. Unfortunately, the Kentucky Wildcats just did not have it in them tonight.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, writer for various SEC-related things. But on this podcast, we take a dive into all things Kentucky athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more, and new customers, if you join today on FanDuel, you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. You can visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. I have done now 445 episodes of this show. Today's number 445. Every single episode, I have opened a tab on Google Docs to write some notes, give some takeaways for whatever game or whatever is happening for Kentucky basketball. Today is going to be the first episode that I have no notes, and I'm going to just talk with you about how I feel about this team right now. Kentucky loses to Tennessee at home 103-92. That is your final score against the top 10 Volunteers. Going to give you my takeaways and my thoughts from today's game. And I want this to be unscripted just so that I can kind of flow easier, I think, with my thoughts tonight. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the show. And if you're listening on podcast, I would greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe there as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Again, 103-92 is the final score tonight. Wildcats just simply did not have it in them, despite a really, really good home environment and just the crowd seeming incredible. It was just a really, really good atmosphere. Kentucky, unfortunately, not able to get it done. Never led in this game. There's a lot that we can get into here today. I think at the end of the day, Kentucky has issues on both ends of the floor, especially on one end, and we'll talk about that. Are they fixable? I think that's a conversation we've had over and over and over on this show. If you've been watching for the past few months, it's something that we talked about before the season even started. Would Kentucky be okay on defense? Would that be a problem? It has become a problem. We've continued to talk about, hey, will the defense ever improve? Will it continue to fall apart? And now Kentucky has lost 3 out of their last 4. They gave up 94 points in overtime to Florida previously at home against the Gators. They've given up 103 tonight against the Volunteers at home. And there seems to be no sign of stopping the bleeding, at least right now. 103 points. 103 points from the Tennessee Volunteers. It's the first time, according to Matt Jones of KSR, that Kentucky has given up 100 in an SEC game since 1993. It's been over 30 years since this has happened. 1989, 2006, 2009, 2020, 2021, 2024. Those are the only years Kentucky has lost back-to-back games in Rupp Arena. That statistic via Drew Franklin of KSR at Drew Franklin KSR on Twitter. There is no sugarcoating the state of Kentucky basketball. Let's call it like it is. Let's take this all the way back to March of last year. The clock runs out against Kansas State. The season is over. There were questions. There were frustrations, there was anger, there was bitterness, there was any negative adjective that you would like to describe how the fan base as a whole felt, or you individually, I'm sure you felt some sort of negativity. And then there was kind of a period of confusion for several months about how Kentucky was going to pick themselves up and rebuild this roster. The one known commodity was Kentucky's freshman class. This group of 5 stars plus Reed Sheppard, who were going to be really good. But Kentucky didn't know how they were going to round out the roster. They went after several prospects in the transfer portal, some of which they came very close to landing. Others, they did not have a chance at, even though some fans really, really wanted them, myself included. Oscar Tshiebwe didn't know if he was going to return to Kentucky or if he was going to leave. By the way, I'll just say this. For as inconsistent as Tshiebwe was at certain things, Kentucky really could have used his rebounding presence on the defensive end, not just tonight. They could have used it this entire season. There are maybe, and I won't say that. Tshiebwe didn't know if he was going to do anything. Antonio Reeves might have left, potentially, had it not been for this freshman class telling him to stay and be the final piece of what this team was going to be. There were ups and downs. There was a lot of chaos. Aaron Bradshaw and Ugonna Onyenso both got hurt. Zvonimir Ivasic was added extremely late to the puzzle, and everyone thought he was going to be super special. And then there was months of confusion about whether or not the NCAA was actually going to get this kid eligible, plus some confusion with Kentucky's actual department there trying to get the kid approved as well. But the whole point being, throughout the last year, 2 years, 3 years of Kentucky basketball, there's been a lot of frustration and upsetness over how this program has performed. And then the off-the-court issues have just kind of built up this snowball of emotion. Despite all of this, there has still been excitement and hope for the future of this season and for the future of this program. And what I've continued to come back to here on the show, and it's the most obvious thing to return to, is the fact that Kentucky is still recruiting very well. Right now, they have an uber-talented roster that can score at will. I think it needs to be noted that Tennessee, that has the second best defense in the nation, according to KenPom, gave up 92 points tonight. Kentucky's defense has been bad all season long. They were never going to hold Tennessee underneath 75 in this one. That was never going to happen. For them to score 103 is surprising. Some of it just coming late there as Kentucky tried to draw the game out. But Kentucky scoring 92 themselves is pleasant, is surprising to see. Hey, that's a good result on the offensive end of the floor. But it's still a loss. It's still a loss. So we've talked about the chaos. We've talked about the, tumultuous ride that has been for Kentucky basketball underneath Coach Cal over these past few years, but particularly this past offseason. Season starts out great. You're picking up wins. You're scoring. You have a really fun game against Kansas that you could have won. You have a big game against North Carolina that you pick up. You lose to UNC Wilmington, which looking back on it, it's just it's a really confusing game. Although despite it making complete sense, just some things that happen, you don't lose those type of games. The Wildcats right now at 15-6, now 5-4 in SEC play, having lost now 3 out of their last 4, and then 4 out of their last 7. They've got a chance to still finish the season okay. They've still got a chance to do that. I want to discuss that a little bit more on Monday's episode of Locked On Kentucky But just know this. As of today, Kentucky basketball is fine. They're okay. And they were projected to lose this game. They lost a game they were supposed to lose. The way that it happened is frustrating. The way that it unfolded, especially in the second half when Kentucky got so close to pulling back into the game, is very frustrating. But I hearken back to what I said, I think actually, a few games ago when Kentucky lost to South Carolina. Is there anything about this team that has changed your opinion of what they will be at the end of the regular season? They cannot play defense right now. The offense is really good and has the ability sometimes to go cold, but it's still one of the best in the nation. What has changed during this losing streak? The only thing that has changed is the difficulty of the contest that Kentucky is finding themselves in. South Carolina is probably one of the best 4 or 5 teams in the SEC. Tennessee may be the best team in the league. Losing to Florida, that's a top half team in this conference that could push for a 5 or a 6 seed, or maybe even in the top 4 if they get lucky. That's a good roster and a good coach. Kentucky had opportunities. Absolutely they did. They could have beaten Florida. Some may argue they should have beaten Florida. They make a free throw, that game's over. Grab a rebound, that game's over. Foul up 3 late, that game is over. And you're okay. You win a game you were supposed to, you lose a game you're supposed to. But now, unfortunately, we're in a reality where Kentucky's gone on a little bit of a losing streak, and it's making some people upset. Understandably so. Let's dive a little bit more into what happened in this game. Some of the heroes, some of the question marks, in just a second. Before I do that, though, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You're looking for something positive to get in on? Hey, the Super Bowl is coming up. It's going to be a lot of fun. And if you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about grabbing some friends, some really good snacks, scoring a really good seat on the couch, and placing down some super awesome bets. And if you go to FanDuel, you can check out so many different ways to end your season with a W or 2 or 3. You don't have to be on a losing streak like Kentucky basketball. You can lay down some wins and do that pretty easily. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown. If you want to go with maybe Brock Purdy or Patrick Mahomes, or maybe a specific receiver that you think may get involved, how many points will be scored. If you think this is going to be a defensive affair, you can definitely bet on that, and so much more on top of that. So, new customers, if you joined today, you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. You can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. Sign up today at FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, continuing along here on the Saturday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Again, I appreciate you guys tuning in. I know you're probably doing it anyway, but go ahead and sound off in the comments below. How do you feel about this one? What are the frustrations? What are the concerns? What do you think Kentucky's going to do moving forward? I'm going to discuss that on Monday because I have an idea of how this season's going to end. We've had an idea of how this season is going to end. I just want to put it in perspective. So let's dive in a little bit here to what happened in this game. Kentucky got down early. The defense was not good. Some of the shots that Tennessee hit from beyond the arc were contested. Some of the shots that the Vols hit were wide open. I do not understand Kentucky and ball screens on defense. We've discussed it over and over on this show, defense is about effort and mental toughness. You get that and you cultivate that through coaching. Kentucky can be coached to be better on defense. I'm trying to simplify this really quickly here. They can be coached to be better, and yet they keep making the same mental mistakes that can be described as easily fixable again and again and again. There were a couple of different threes that Tennessee hit in that first half and in the second half, the whole game, where a player gets a screen. He's going to have an opportunity to shoot, and he takes the shot because the player defending him that got caught on the screen, not only does he not fight through the screen, but he also kind of sags off and looks away from the man he was defending while putting an arm on the man that's screening him. It's like they completely forget about their assignment. And this is multiple players on this roster, not just one. Reed Sheppard was guilty of this. Antonio Reeves was guilty of this. Justin Edwards was guilty of this. There were so many, Rob Dillingham, so many different moments where it's not hard to pick up on man defense. And yet there are just complete and total collapses. There were so many baseline out of bounds plays where Kentucky just got ripped apart. It was embarrassing. It was pitiful how bad the defense was, that Dalton Knecht was able to get open at the rim twice on the same play, where Justin Edwards got screened and Rob Dillingham, who was supposed to come over to help, did not even look at the basket. It feels like it should be easier than this. It is a bunch of high-level, gifted Division I athletes, not just Division I, 5 stars, really good players, really athletic players, physically gifted. They need better coaching. This does not happen if you don't have good, or this stuff like this does not happen if you have good coaching. Getting effort out of your players is a culture thing, and again, it's a motivation thing. These kids play hard at times. These kids fight at times. Getting them to collectively put together 40 minutes and battle it out has been a struggle this season. I understand that this coaching staff, despite all of their accolades, will struggle at different points because, of their personnel. It's not sometimes all on the coaches. But at the end of the season, it will be on them. If the season flames out, which there's a chance it will, there's a chance it might not. If the season flames out, the defense and the coaching of it thereof will be to blame. Coach Cal has not had a good defense in quite some time. This year, he's got, I think, maybe the worst defense of his, time in Lexington, and maybe one of the worst of his career. It's bad. It's bad. Not being able to get through ball screens and not being able to protect the rim, allowing your big men to get sealed off over and over and over while a player drives to the basket and finishes with ease. I guarantee you, most of the people listening to this podcast could drive and finish a layup given the sets that that Tennessee ran against Kentucky, because they'd have so much clearance to the basket. Nothing would be in their way. Nobody would put an arm out. No one would put a hand in their face. You would just be able to take 2 dribbles and lay it in. Kentucky has to fight harder on that end of the floor. Josiah Jordan-James, 26 points, shooting 50% from the floor and 4 of 9 from deep. Kentucky didn't have the forwards to match up with these guys tonight. Zakai Zeigler. I said he was good in the pregame. Said he may be an issue. 26 points, 8 of 11 from the floor at 5'9". 13 assists, a career high for him. 22 assists in total for the Tennessee Volunteers. Dalton Knecht, who averages over 20 a game, had 16 points on 5 of 14 shooting. Jonas Adu had a double-double with 11 and 10. Santiago Vescovi came off the bench and had 11. Actually, he might have started. I don't remember. But what did we say about this game in the preview? Kentucky has players that come off the bench for them and give them somewhere between 9 to 15 points or more, depending on if they pop off. But Kentucky's got a little bit more balance that produces at a higher rate. They just score more. Whereas in Tennessee's losses, they've had Dalton Knecht, they've maybe had one other guy, and the rest of the team falls flat. 5 different Volunteers scored in double figures tonight for UT. 3 different players for Kentucky finished with double figures. Rob Dillingham had an exceptional night. 35 points, 14 of 20, 6 of 8 from 3, 4 assists, a +5 plus-minus. He was one of 2 Wildcats that finished with a positive plus-minus. Aduthiero had a +6 in 23 minutes of play. He was excellent. Beautiful, beautiful shots. Incredible. It's just magic. You can't ask for more than that. You couldn't ask for half of that. But he produced. Antonio Reeves had a bad day. 8 of 18 from the floor, 1 of 5 from deep. Tennessee clamped down on defense. They've got the guards to do that. He had 21 points, but some of it came late. Reed Shepard, 16 points, 6 of 14, 4 of 7 from beyond the arc. Had 5 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 blocks. I mean, there were a couple of bright moments from the guards here. DJ Wagner did not play because of injury. Would have liked to have seen him out there in this one. Zvonimir Ivasic did not play. He's sick, and he was available in case of dire emergency. Never came to that tonight for UK. We had some good moments on offense, but here's what I said this on the recap episode of the Florida game, and I'm going to say it here again today. Trey Mitchell, not only being a non-factor, but also not being able to collect rebounds consistently was painful to watch. Ugonna Onyenso giving up at 6'11", 7 foot, whatever you want to call him. He's a mammoth down low. Giving up easy layups, not just 3 or 4 times, but over and over and over and over. Your front court presences have been putrid over the past couple of weeks. Putrid. Bad. No other way to put it. And I understand that there comes a point where you have to accept the fact that it's basketball. Players are going to score. It happens. But when you're giving up 97 a night and you look up and at the end of the day, Tennessee has how many points in the paint? 42. And they're just working on your guys all night long. It hurts. It hurts. It's something you need to identify. Here's an interesting note from Matt Jones of KSR. Kentucky's 3 main bigs, Trey Mitchell, Aaron Bradshaw, and Ugonna Onyenso, combined for 4 points tonight. 4. Count them up. And he says, and I agree with him, pretty straightforward here, ain't going to be beating anybody decent playing like that. No, sir. You are certainly not. Speaking of beating good teams, let's take a look at Kentucky's resume. Sean Smith. At GBB Country, Quad 1 wins. Kentucky is 2-4 in the Quad 1 right now, according to the net ratings. 3-2 in Quad 2, 4-1 in Quad 3, and 6-0 in Quad 4. 3-4 in their last total 7 games. Things are not good in Lexington. There's nothing else to say other than the offense is good. The defense is bad. You lost to a team you were supposed to lose, but the way you did it tonight sucks. It just stinks. I think Kentucky, by the way, we'll talk about this on Monday, so we'll just go ahead and tease that out. I think Kentucky will win games here to close out the schedule. I think they will. Hey, by the way, you got a big game against Gonzaga in a week. That's going to be a lot of fun. I think Kentucky can close this season out strongly, or at least at the very least, like, okay. It's not the end of the world, but tonight it's a frustrating one. Not being able to pick this one up is frustrating. I think that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. If you want to, and I would encourage you to do so, you can follow the show on Twitter at LockedOnUK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all on Monday. Hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend, and God bless.